Hi guys, welcome to the very first hookery class. So here today is where we start teaching you how to crochet. Some of you already know how to crochet, of course. Some of you are excellent, some of you are better than me, and I look at some of your work and think, wow, that's amazing. However, there are still some people out there can't read crochet patterns, can't read the symbol charts, and they haven't yet bought hooks or yarns, and they're right at the beginning of their crochet journey. So that's where we're going to start. Today we're going to look at basic equipment. We're going to look at hooks and yarns. We're going to make a slip knot. We're going to learn how to chain. We're going to learn how to single crochet, keep your stitch count consistent, keep nice straight edges. And we'll finish up by making a simple mobile phone holder. But before we start, let me just tell you, down here somewhere, you should see a cogwheel. Sometimes there's 3 dots or 3 lines, depending on what device you use. If at any point I'm going too fast for you, just slow me down. Click on the settings, and then you can slow me down. You can choose 75, 50 or 25%. So that's if at any point I go too fast or you just want me to go a little bit slower. Just slow me down from there on the settings. So let's start with our equipment, hey? Crochet hooks. These ones here, silicone handles, metal tops. These are my go-tos. And when I'm using double knit, number 3 yarn, number 4 yarn, number 5 yarn, these are my go-tos. They've got the metal shaft, the silicone handle that sits nicely in your hand, doesn't dig in. I find they don't hurt my wrists. They're nice and soft, they're chunky enough to hold. These ones I use all day, every day. Some of them, they look a bit grubby, they look discoloured, they are clean. They pick up the dye from, especially Bernat Blanket. Thank you, Bernat. Bernat always bleeds out onto my needles. It doesn't bleed back, so I'm quite confident using this on white, knowing that that black there isn't going to bleed back off onto the white. There are 2 types of ordinary, everyday crochet hooks when you go to the shops. You can get inline hooks, or you can get tapered hooks. All mine are tapered. All my hooks, I use tapered hooks. They taper in slightly at the shoulder before the hook. This is your shaft. This is the bit here. This is a 7mm hook. It's here that's 7mm wide. It's slightly thinner there. An inline hook would be like this. It's the same width here as it is here. So when you've got a loop on your hook, as you go to take the hook out, if you're pulling on your yarn, if you're keeping the tension really tight, as you slip that hook out, that stitch will still be the same width. This is an 8mm hook. That stitch width is going to be 8mm when you take it off, because it's inline, it doesn't taper. If you keep a tension really tight on the tapered hooks, when you take that hook out, you could reduce that to 5mm. This is a 7mm hook. You could be reducing that stitch to a 5mm stitch just because you're pulling and you're making it really tight to try and get the hook out. You don't want to be putting tension on your hook at all. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Really, crochet is supposed to be relaxing. It's supposed to be fun. There's not supposed to be tension there at all. You don't want to keep a taut, tensed yarn, but we'll cover that in a little bit. So they're the 2 different types of hooks, inline and tapered. And there are all sort of hooks you can buy. These ones have got the silicone handles, they're nice and soft in your hand. They don't dig in anywhere. I've also got some metal hooks. These are generally standard. You'll find these in most stores. But I've often seen people with calluses here where the hooks are rubbing. As people are using them, they're rubbing there on the fleshy part of the hand there. Once you've got your thumb grip. When you're holding your crochet hook, most people will hold a crochet hook this way. Like a knife, that's the knife hold. Some people hold them that way, that's the pencil hold. I can't work a crochet hook like a pencil. I hold mine like a knife, I dig in. I'm a digger. So there's your aluminium hooks. Then we've got some light up hooks. I did have the full set of these. I think I gave some of them away. I don't like them. I'm not a fan. And we've got a bamboo hook. I've managed to give all my bamboo hooks away now. Bamboo, they're okay. I'm not a fan of these. They snap easy. The light up hooks, they're great for dark colours and they light up. You can see that. If you're working in a dark room anytime you don't want to put a light on and disturb your partner, then great. The only problem with them is where the light is focused on the tip there, that's where you're working and your eyes are trained on that light. So after a while your eyes start to get sore by looking at the light all the time. So I've used them a few times, but I'm not the biggest fan of light up hooks. I prefer to have a light behind my shoulders, looking over my shoulders onto my work. But there is a purpose for them, and other people might like them, of course. So if you are using a dark yarn, I've got one of these. This is a neck light. This goes around your neck and sits on top of your boobies. You can angle them wherever you like, and you can turn them on independently. You can get these on Amazon. You can point them towards your work, and you're not actually looking at the light because the light's focusing on your work rather than up into your eyes. So they're a good little gadget. Like I say, they're on Amazon. Take a couple of batteries, keep them in your drawer. They're a good little bit of kit to have. Oh, 2 giant chunky hooks. I didn't show you those ones. I've used those a few times for rugs. The next thing you're going to need is a good old trusty tape measure or a ruler. You want to be measuring different bits and pieces. Always make sure you've got pen and paper by your side. You never know when that comes in handy. We're crocheters, we count everything, we count stitches, we count repeats, we count rows. Someone talks to us and we're in the middle of counting and we just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, and you get louder and louder until they get the hint and either go away, or you can get to a point where you go, and what? What do you want now? So let me just pop these hooks away and into my trusty pencil case. That's where my everyday hooks live. And then we're going to need some yarn needles. So there's an assortment of yarn needles that you can get. Plastic ones with big eyes, plastic ones with smaller eyes. The finishing needles, these are great for, you don't need to have any special talents to thread these. Just pop your yarn straight in there, they're brilliant. And as long as you've not got anything too tight tension, they'll slide through all your stitches, or your metal ones. These are my daily all-time go-tos. Got a slight curve on the end. They're great for stuffy toys, for going, catching all the angles when you're stuffing and putting arms on teddies and things like that. So they're great little needles. And then I've got my button needle with a thinner eye, just one strand of thin yarn to put my buttons on with. One special needle that I've got is a snag needle. These are great if you can keep your eyes open in the sewing shops for these. They're smooth on the end for the point. They've got like a emery part at the top. There's no hole, you don't put cotton through them. If you snag a yarn on a sweater or you're making a blanket, you've got a scaggy nail and you catch a yarn and you pull a thread out, what you do is you get this needle and it's called a snag needle. You push it through where the thread is out, and if you push the needle through near to where the thread is out, make sure that you gather it, pull it through to the back, and it'll pull the loose thread through to the back of your work. Worth its weight in gold. I highly recommend these, so keep your eyes open for a snag needle. They're a good bit of kit to have if you work with yarn a lot. So then we've got stitch markers. Stitch markers come in handy for when you want to mark off any stitches or how many rows you've done. Here's something I did earlier. So say if I want to mark off, I don't know, say 6 rows, so that's 2, 4, whatever, we'll pop a stitch marker in here. This is the same row as I put my button in, and close them up, they're not hurting. And I also use them just to hang on to my loose loop, like a stitch holder. I've got one there. And they hold those quite nicely. Another little, this is actually a knitting stitch holder, but they come in handy for different bits and pieces, so if anyone's been gifted some of these, keep hold of them, because you'll find a use for them at some point. So there's our needles, stitch markers. You can use scraps of yarn. I've done that quite a lot, and I still do it now. Just use an odd scrapment of yarn and pop that in to keep your place. Knitting in elastic for if you're doing ribs. Normally you'd use this with 1 strand of yarn if you're knitting ribs. But if you're crocheting ribs, you can use it with 1 strand of yarn for your crocheted ribs as well. It just helps on the return of the stretch. So if you're knitting a hat and you've got a ribbed brim, then 1 strand of this in with your crochet. It's not exactly the easiest thing. If you put it on a little spindle that goes round and round, then obviously that helps. Or pop it into a bowl. And just 1 strand of that with 1 strand of your yarn on a knitted rib, it just helps the stretch to return at the end, because quite often crochet ribs aren't not the stretchiest of things. Long needles with big heads, long pins with big heads rather. If you're pinning something together crochet wise, because it's quite open, you need something with a big head so that you can see the pins and you're not going to lose them. So definitely they're a good bit of equipment to have. Blocking boards, all sorts of, there's so many pieces of equipment that you could go out and buy. Blocking boards I have, but I've got the kids play mats, the 1, 2, 3 ABC kid foam play mats. A set of those for a tenner at your local cheapy shop, and they make great blocking boards for when you want to block your squares, block your work. A latch hook, these are great for doing fringing. They're a good little bit of kit. If anyone sees any of those and they're cheap, grab one. They come in handy for different bits and pieces. Obviously sharp scissors, these are my daily scissors. Nice little dinky ones, but I use those all the time. This is my row counter. I don't use this. I can count my stitches, but they come in handy. If you need to keep account of how many rows you're doing, every time you complete a row, you just click one. This one hangs around your neck. You just click it on. That says 9, now 10, 11, 12, so that you can keep account of how many rows you've got. when you've got kids and dogs and that running around under your feet all the time, then I guess they come in handy. But little gadgets and gizmos. Labels and cards, if you're selling or you're gifting your pieces, then sometimes it's nice to sew a little label in. You can get these printed, Etsy, eBay. The cards that I put in with my gifts and my sale items, and I've put on there, make sure to share your pics. Daisy L Hookery, they came from Vistaprint, they were cheap. But just nice little bits to include with your work, just makes it look a little bit more professional. And last but not least, most important thing, hand creams. Working with yarn makes your hands very dry. You might see some crochet close-up videos, and yeah, especially around the fingertips, around here, it gets really dry because you're working with yarn. Shea butter, that's the main ingredient. That's the one that you're looking for because it absorbs. It's not greasy. It doesn't leave sticky, cloggy yarn. It absorbs into the skin nice, and it just helps. These are a great little gift as well if you know anyone who knits and crochets, because this is something that's appreciated. My oldest daughter bought me these for Christmas, and they're gorgeous. They smell lovely. And she bought them for me because, well, obviously I work with yarn all the time and I do get dry hands. So that's a good thing to have in your kit bag. And then, of course, yarns. Where do we start with yarns? My God, there's so many. Here we've got a selection. We've got the thin sock yarn. That's a very thin yarn. And the UK go-to standard is the double knit yarn, which is the next one up. The American US standard is the number 4 worsted yarn. That's that one. That's our Aran. Then a chunky yarn. A burnout blanket, super bulky yarn, or super chunky. And then this stuff is the stuff of devils. This is eyelash yarn. Sometimes you can get it thinner than this, crazier than that. Always team it up with one strand of double knit, or even one strand of number 4 worsted. Always team them together. Never try working with this by itself. You can't see the stitches, you can't feel the stitches. It's a nightmare to work with. So always use that plus a strand of either number 3 or number 4, and then you should be right. So they're yarns. I'll be doing a separate video on yarns and yarn labels for this week's class. I'll put that on the tutorial page, and I'm going to do a separate video for actually getting to grips with your yarn and your hook, and making your slip knot, making your chain, and making a mobile phone holder. Reason being is otherwise this video would be over like an hour long, and that's too long to expect you to sit there while I'm prattling on. So I'm going to go and get a cup of tea, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about yarn bands. And then after that, I will do a separate video and show you exactly how to make a mobile phone cover, keeping your edges straight, your stitches consistent, and you'll be able to crochet. So I'll see you in a little bit, and thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe to the blog. Come and join us on our Facebook group. I'll put all the links in the bottom of this video so that you'll have them on the YouTube page. And I'll talk to you all soon. Bye bye.